Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, madam.
How are you doing today? How are you all today? And um, this is our last session on educational technology. Okay. And before getting into educational technology, it's the same batch that I actually am doing psychology as well. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, Philip. So, Philip, the extrovert. Okay. Uh, right. Um, then I actually check with the campus. Then for psychology also, I'm sending you a written assignment, not a presentation this time. Okay. So by Wednesday, like that, you will be getting your psychology assignment as well. I will actually request from the campus to give you a 1 month's time to do that assignment as well.
Okay,
Okay.
ma'am.
Right. Then it's actually not theory based. My assignments are not theory based. It's actually, if it is theory based, just a matter of actually searching internet and cut and paste. No? So most of the time that I actually make it a kind of an application based that you saw for educational technology. What I gave, it's not very difficult, but you can't cut and paste. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, something like that I will think of, right, in getting into your um, assignment. That is psychology. But anyway, we have another session for psychology. But today, for educational technology, it's the last session. So, actually speaking, I have covered your syllabus. So, I will do a small recap and I will discuss one or two, three questions and how to write answers for those questions and all that. And I can remember that uh, questioning as a technique, brainstorming as a technique. Did I do those things?
No, ma'am.
That, of course, I have to do with you all. The techniques of teaching. We covered approaches, we covered methods, but we did not do a technique. So we can actually get into techniques as well. So first I will finish the techniques of education, and then we'll do a small recap of what we have done. And then I will actually brief you on, no, I will give you one or two model answer questions and discuss how to actually formulate your answer. So then we are done and dust. I'm done and dusted with your module, educational technology, but marking will be there definitely. So it's up to you to study and be prepared for examinations. Okay. Right. So first thing that I want to do is I will first show you the content we did. And then when it comes to techniques, I will stop there for a while and discuss the techniques. And then once the techniques are discussed, I will continue with the rest of it, what I have done. Okay. So let me open my PowerPoint. I'm sorry, the lecture materials. Uh, right here. As I promised you, all the lecture materials in one zip file for both the subjects. I will be sending you soon. So don't worry about it. What is sent and what is not sent, it's a problem. No? So I'm not going to actually do like that, what is not sent like that. All the lecture materials I will put into one zip file for both the subjects and send you, right? So don't worry. And now, right. Uh, Educational technology. So in the first session, this is what we did. Okay, I'm sharing the document. In the first session, this is what we did because some of you might have missed it. And while showing, we can actually discuss a little bit of it as well. So it's the first session, Introduction to Teacher Training and Methodology. So we discuss educational technology is all about the teaching and learning process. Everything that happens in the learning and teaching process is educational technology, right? So, with that understanding, we first look at, so any teacher who gets into the profession, who gets into teaching, they should know that the term pedagogy. Pedagogy is teaching young children. You are teaching children, schools, right? So you are into pedagogy. If you're teaching adults, now I'm teaching you, you all are adults, right? So it is andragogy. So you don't have to get it mixed up. So how I do my teaching, it's all lecture method, and I don't actually get you to do activities in the class, and vast syllabus is covered in a short period of time. That is okay with andragogy because you all are highly motivated. Cognitively, you all are actually matured. So that kind of teaching is appropriate with the adult learners, that is andragogy. But here in this module, we discuss about pedagogy. Pedagogy is teaching school children. Okay, teaching the young. Then, of course, they are not intrinsically motivated. They are not cognitively matured. Because of that, the teachers have to use appropriate approaches, methods, and techniques, right? Teachers have to use appropriate approaches, methods, and techniques in instructions or in the learning teaching process. Andragogy, as I'm teaching you, the adults, it's a different story. You all are matured cognitively, you all are highly intrinsically motivated. Whether I teach or not, you can engage in self learning. They're possible with you all. But pedagogy, the teaching the young, you have to, as teachers, select the best approach, the best method or methods, and the best techniques in each and every teaching and learning venture. That is this module is all about, and you're being prepared for that. So the methodology of teachings, now we look at the term methodology then. Methodology is actually is an umbrella term. Methodology is an umbrella term. So it covers, right, the areas related to teaching and learning, that is what to teach, what are the aims of teaching, and how to teach. What to teach, what are the aims of teaching, and how to teach. All these thinking and concepts in your learning and teaching process comes under the umbrella term, that is methodology, right? How much of it is to teach. Now, today you're teaching about trees for the grade 3. In this particular 40-minute lesson for this grade 3 class, how much about trees you're going to teach? Is it only the parts of the trees? Or with the parts of the trees, are you going to teach them the functions of the each part? Or it is separated? How much of it, right? That how you are going to teach it. Is it you are going to explain, whether you are going to get them to experience it and explore new knowledge like that? How you are going to teach? All these thinking the teachers have, it comes under the umbrella term methodology. Okay. Then, if you look at the concept of teaching, it consists of three main elements. That is approaches, teaching methods, and teaching techniques. As teachers, when you want to teach your students, each and every lesson, you should have a very clear understanding. For this particular lesson, what is my teaching approach? Based on the particular teaching approach, what are the methods that I'm going to use? And based on the methods, what techniques would be appropriate? So you're walking into a classroom to do a 40-minute lesson, you're very clear about it. That is professionalism. That is actually what is expected of a teacher. So the connection between approach, method, and technique, we have discussed this enough. Approach is basically a set of assumptions about teaching that the teacher holds. It's basically a set of assumptions. It's the teacher's philosophical thinking about teaching, right? How my students learn. They learn by listening, they learn by reading, or they learn by doing and saying. So whether they want to actually be passive, whether they have to be active in the class, what do you think about it? That is the approach. It's actually a set of beliefs that the teacher holds about how teaching happens, how learning happens. Accordingly, that you can select the approach. If you take what we discuss as teaching approaches, we looked at the two main approaches. What are they? If I ask you, what are the two main?
Teacher-centered and student-centered approaches.
Very good. Teacher-centered approach and student-centered approach. So we looked at the elements of teacher-centered and student-centered approach by comparing the two, right? So we will stop for a while and then we'll discuss the teacher-centered and student-centered approaches to teaching, set of beliefs that you hold, right? As the teacher, how learning happens, Kela. I will ask you, you can actually interact, not only Nilakshi, not only Philip, others as well. Uh, Teacher-centered and student-centered. I will give you the criteria. You tell me what their feature is related to the criteria. What's the theory, learning theory, these approaches grounded in? Behaviorism is grounded in which theory? Sorry,
Teacher-centered approach.
teacher-centered. Yeah, teacher-centered approach is grounded in behaviorism as the learning theory. ඒක තමයි පළවෙනිම කියන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට student-centered approach is grounded in what learning theory?
Constructivism.
Constructivism. Then after that we discuss, I think you have a note, am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah, then based on that, students are passive in teacher-centered, students are highly active in student-centered. In teacher-centered, students listen, students read, students see, and then they learn. But in student-centered classroom, the students say and do. Students say and do. You can actually refer to the Dale's cone of learning and remembering there. And then in behaviorism, students are empty vessels. You don't think that the students have prior knowledge and recording them, right? But in student-centered constructivism, students are not empty vessels. They have prior knowledge, they have existing knowledge, knowledge of the world, knowledge of the language, the experiences. So you're going to start from what they already know and then get them to build new knowledge on top of what they already know. That is why we call it constructivism. Construct on all what they already know, the new knowledge. Okay. So then in teacher, in the behaviorism, teacher is the knowledge imparter. Teacher has knowledge, the teacher imparts knowledge to the students. Teacher spoon feeds. Teacher gets them to learn by repetition. Teacher thinks that learning is habit formation through repetition. But in constructivism, learning is trial and error. Learning is discovery learning. Students have to actually, on top of what they know, making use of what they already know, they have to discover new knowledge. So the teacher is a facilitator. Teacher is a knowledge manager. Teacher is a guide. Okay, teacher is a facilitator, knowledge manager, and she's a guide. So teacher brings activities for the students to do, and students actively do activities. Teacher actually guide them and monitor them and facilitate it. That is it. And then if you take what else? Errors, mistakes. In behaviorism, mistakes are disastrous because if they repeat mistakes, they will actually get fossilized. So because of that, mistakes are not allowed in teacher-centered classroom. You try to minimize mistakes done by the students. To minimize the mistakes done by the students, teacher gives them not free activities, but guided activities, matching, completion, transformation from positive to negative, from reading passage to a grid, like that. Because if you give them freedom, they will make mistakes and they will be fossilized. But in constructivism, it's trial and error learning, no, discovery learning, no. So mistakes can't, you can't help it, but they make mistakes. They are proof of learning. So you don't fear mistakes, get them to make mistakes and learn through their mistakes. That is it. And likewise, we discuss the features of teacher-centered approach and student-centered approach. And you have to be very thorough because it's a main area in this module. Okay. Now, based on the approach, teaching approach that you select for the particular lesson, you will select your methods, teaching methods as well. If I ask you what are the teaching methods that we discuss, can you name them? What are the teaching methods we discuss?
Lecture method,
Yeah, very
demonstration
good.
method, discussion,
Yeah,
discovery, and scientific methods.
yeah, scientific method. And apart from that, flipped method, jigsaw method. All these are methods. Okay, and there are other methods as well. Okay, then from the teacher-centered approach, we selected two methods. What are they? Lecture method and demonstration method. They are highly teacher-centered because the lecture method, another term for lecture method, another term for lecture method, chalk and talk method. Chalk and talk method. The teacher in front of the class, teacher goes on explaining, writing something on the board. Am I right? So we refer to it as chalk and talk method. Demonstration method is also highly teacher-centered. We call it show and
Tell method.
tell method කියලා. ඒතර ළමයි මොකද කරන්නේ? They listen and they see. They listen and see. So they are very passive. They are very passive. So if you decide on behaviorism, if you decide on teacher-centered, then you can use lecture method and demonstration method as methods in the teaching process, right? But if you think, I want to go constructivist, I want to be teacher student centered because it's highly effective. 90% of learning can happen when the students are active participants, when they say and do. So you actually use student centered approach. Then you can select from discussion, scientific method, discovery method, and then jigsaw method, then flipped method, where the students are students actively participate in classroom learning and teaching, and teacher at the background facilitating and guiding them. So, but we have a question mark. Which approach is better? There's no answer to that. We all can see that students are active participation is there. 90% of learning can happen. Definitely, it's the best. But when it comes to implementation, right? Student-centered approach has its own limitations as well. We have large classes. Teacher can't handle a large class uh, if you're student-centered, right? And then it is time consuming because students have to actually do something and learn. It is highly time consuming, not like that the teacher go in front of the class and explain. And culture shock. Our students are used to teacher-centered methods. Teacher explaining everything. When you actually all over start actually getting them to discover, they are not ready. They are not open with open arms. They don't actually accept that method of approach of teaching. So culture shock will be there. And lack of resources, right? Teacher centered, no resources needed. Teacher knows everything. Teacher walks into the classroom. Teacher goes on telling. You don't have to be prepared. But in student centered, teacher has to be prepared because teacher is not going to explain. Instead, teacher has to prepare materials for reading or listening. It's not only language, it's science. So you're going to teach them the life cycle of the butterfly. So you prepare a reading passage and get the students to actually do an activity, cut and paste activity to notice the most important part of the reading passage. And they come to know by reading what is the life cycle of this butterfly here, rather than the teacher telling. But you can see if teacher tells, it takes no time. If the students have to read and understand and do an activity to know it, and it is time consuming. Okay. So those are the actually aspects that we can discuss in teacher-centered and student-centered. So we have done that. Then under, there are some other approaches also we discuss. I think it is not very important here. And then we discuss in the second session, teaching methods. Okay, teaching methods. If it is teaching methods, we first started with the teaching methods from the teacher-centered approach to teaching. So as you said, it's lecture method and demonstration method. In lecture method, what we discuss is, right? We discuss how to make a lecture an effective one. How to make a lecture an effective one. This is wrong. How to make a lecture an effective one. Can you remember what we discussed there? How to make a lecture an effective one? Can you remember? Are you there listening? Right. Before that, now we all are actually deciding on teaching approach and the teaching methods to be used. What are the factors that helps you to determine which approach and which methods are to be used? Are you listening, please?
Yes, madam.
Yeah,
Number of students
very
in the
good.
class.
Definitely, yes. The size of the class, you're good. Then,
The topic and the subject content which you are going to teach them.
definitely, yes. Because if it is very hard facts and very complex topics, then of course the students themselves can't discover it. Yes, very good. What else?
Time period, madam.
Yeah, definitely, yes. Suppose you have a big unit to teach, only 2 periods remaining, then you can't go teach a student centered. Instead, you can go in front of class and explain it and finish it off because you have only 2 more periods for that. Very good. What else?
Time allocation
Definitely, yes.
and availability of teaching and learning resources.
Very good. Because if you have a kind of a packed class, no technological devices, that no your visual aids like that, then of course you will not be able to actually go to student centered. So you will decide on teacher centered approach. And then, and your philosophical assumption about teaching. If you believe that I have to explain, they have to listen and learn, they have to read and learn, that is your philosophical assumption. So based on that, you will select the method, whether it's lecture method or whatever. If you believe that my students learn better when they are actually allowed to be active participants, when they are allowed to actually learn more by doing it, and then of course you will decide on other methods like discussion, flip method and all that. Yes. So your philosophical beliefs also contribute to the selection of method. Okay. Now we have done a brainstorming activity to see which method is suitable here in these scenarios. We are not going to look at. But we have discussed the lecture method, chalk and talk method. How to make, what are the kind of features of lecture method. So if you take lecture method, it is drawn from which approach? You can take one and talk about the lecture method. Look at the criteria and talk about the lecture method.
The approach is teacher-centered.
The approach is teacher-centered. තව එකට grounded on behavior.
Behaviorism.
Behaviorism. Right, very good. That is learning is habit formation. Learning is habit formation through repetition and drilling. Am I right? Okay, very good. So next one, teacher's role, how you are going to comment? In the
Knowledge is
lecture
important.
method? Yeah. You are correct. Knowledge is important. Then teacher role. In the lecture method, what is the role of the teacher?
Teach
Knowledge
active and
imparter.
Teacher,
Knowledge imparter. Teacher's role is knowledge
teacher is a knowledge imparter. Teacher is authoritative. Students' interests are not taken into consideration. That is why the teacher is authoritative. And teacher is the knowledge imparter. Okay, very good. Then student role in lecture method.
passive. Listen and learn, madam.
Yeah, students are passive, listen and learn, read and learn, etc. Then what else? Okay. Then class size.
Large class.
Oh yeah, even a large class with 100 students can be handled in the lecture method. Okay, content.
Difficult content.
vast
Yeah,
and
even difficult content can be taught using the lecture method. Merits, advantages.
Student will
We
not out
discuss
of
it,
the
no?
yeah, madam.
Student will not say,
Out of the point because lesson is
yeah,
broken.
they will not go out of the point
Yeah, ma'am.
because the teacher explains to the point. Right, very good. Then,
Time saving.
sorry,
time
I did
set.
not hear you. Yeah, time effective, cost effective. Yes, but what are the limitations?
Student made to be passive and student
Yeah,
bored.
students are bored, and how much of learning can happen?
No
Dale's
room for
phone එකට අනුව. No room for?
creativity.
Yeah, the 21st century forces creativity, critical thinking, cooperation, and communication. No room for the development of the 4 C's of the 21st century. Definitely, yes. And another limitation is how much of learning, according to Dale's Cohn, less than 50% of learning. I showed you the Dale's Cohn, ne? Am I right? Yes or
Yeah,
no?
madam.
Yeah. So qualities of a good lecture. Now, whether we like it or not, across the globe in the school context also, we use lecture method, right? Due to its own advantages, right? So if you are conducting lectures, if you are using the lecture method in your class, how to make your lecture a good quality lecture, right? If you are using the lecture method, how to make it a good lecture. Here we have discussed it by looking at 6 points. First එක තමයි, it should not be very long. They can't be listening to you for hours and hours. A good lecture should not be too long as to exceed the student's attention span. Students' attention span is limited. They can't go on listening to you. Because of that, lectures cannot be lengthy. A good lecture is never lengthy. Second point, you're addressing only one single topic. You're not going to talk about a lot of things referring to different topics and all that. Then it is confusing for the learner. If you're using lecture method, you make sure it's one big topic and the subtopics that you're going to handle in one lecture. Third one, always carefully explain the technical terms. There are technical terms in any lesson, any subject, right? So life cycle of the butterfly, they have their own terms. If you take English language grammar, they have their own terms. So explaining these technical terms very carefully is a very important thing in a lecture. The next one, give them examples and analogies. Analogies is comparison. Then they can better understand, right? Always in your lecture, when you explain something, give them examples and use analogies, comparisons. So you facilitate understanding of what you actually tell them. Then a good lecture employs some techniques drawn from other approaches, right? Now you're going to conduct a lecture, but at the end of the lecture, you can give them a small discussion. If not, at the end of the lecture, that you can get them to actually come in front of class and do a small presentation. So you're not going to limit it only to a lecture. You're going to draw some other features from other methods and approaches and combine it with the lecture method, then to make it at least a little bit more student-centered. Okay? And when you are doing a lecture, make sure that you use teaching aids, maybe charts, maybe maps, maybe objects, maybe visual aids, maybe videos. You are going to use them, then they can actually, their learning is facilitated. So that is how you can make the typical lecture method a bit more attractive and effective. Then we discuss the demonstration method. Under demonstration method, you can say it's a teacher-centered method. It is actually drawn from teacher-centered approach. And the teacher go in front of the class and demonstrate, show and tell how to do something, right? If it is a demonstration that you conduct, you need to actually observe that these good qualities are there. Make sure all the students can see and hear you. Observe all safety rules and procedures. If it is chemicals, that you wear kind of masks like that. You always have to keep eye contact with the class and ask and encourage questions from the class. Explain why and how. Use the techniques of show and tell. Use a summary to strengthen your explanation. Once it's explained, you can actually give them the summary of what you have done. If not, you can get them to build up their own summary as well by asking them questions. That is very important. Then we actually looked at the discussion method. So I'm not going to explain everything. You can actually see we have discussed discussion method. Then this is discovery method. Okay. And then the scientific method, the steps of the scientific method and all that. Then we discuss the flipped method and the jigsaw method in the next lecture. Flipped method and the jigsaw method. So I'm not going to talk to you now about the flip method and the jigsaw method. We have done it. You have the recordings, you have the lecture notes. So you can actually, if you are not thorough, you can actually read them again. But they are all student-centered approach-based methods. Discussion, uh, scientific method, discovery method, flip method, jigsaw method, they are all student-centered. Students actively participate. They are very active participants. They discover new knowledge by engaging in tasks. That is. So with that, we go to the next, that is techniques in uh, teaching and the learning process. That part, of course, we could not discuss. So I'm going to add that part, techniques in teaching and learning. So the techniques that you use at the implementation level, that I told you, the approach is philosophical. Um, you're not at the implementing level. So when it comes to actually doing your lesson, then you need to make use of the techniques, some of the techniques. So if you have a teacher-centered approach and if you have the lecture method, so classroom techniques will be getting them to listen and learn, right? But if you are a student-centered teacher, you would believe in student-centered approach and you would use discussions, you use flipped method and all that. So there, of course, there are lots of classroom techniques that you have to use. One such technique is grouping technique, because if you say discussion, you can actually put them into group and discuss. So you are using the technique of grouping. If it is the jigsaw method, there are different types of grouping that you have to do. So it's a technique that you use, okay? And suppose now you're going to teach them some writing, all right? Essay writing and all that. So they need ideas. So for that, you can use brainstorming as a kind of a technique in the class. Brainstorming, maybe you give them 1 minute. You ask them now this topic, whatever comes to your mind, without actually thinking twice whether it's right or wrong. Go on without actually taking the pen off the paper for 1 minute, what comes to your mind on um, uh, uh, trees, right? That is idea generation. So that is a kind of a technique you use. And if it is a young learner, set of young learners, maybe storytelling, you're teaching history. So history is a kind of a dry subject, hard subject. Some students, they don't like it. So you can use the storytelling method there to teach history, right? And then if it is a kind of a language class, you can use role playing as a technique. Get them to come in front of the class and role play the dialogues and all that. So these are actually the techniques that you use at the implementation level. Okay, at the implementation level. So I'm not going to discuss all these, but I'm going to discuss questioning as a technique, brainstorming as a technique, and grouping as a technique, right? Questioning as a technique in the classroom technique, grouping as a classroom technique, and then brainstorming as a classroom technique. But storytelling and then drama, playlet, simulation, all these are actually classroom techniques. You got my point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So let me now talk to you about questioning as a classroom technique, right? It's very important, I think, for exam purpose also, and not only for exam purpose. Now, as a teacher, you walk into the classroom. So how to effectively use this questioning technique, you can know. Because of that, take interest in that. Let me open my PowerPoint on questioning as a classroom technique. No, this is wrong. I made a mistake. Right. Here. Right. Now you can make your notes as well, because this is not done before. These are teaching techniques which we could not do. Can you see the PowerPoint shared there?
Yes, madam.
Yeah. So questioning as a teaching technique. Here I would like to quote Agrawal, 1996, and he's an Indian educationist, and he has done lots of research on questioning as a classroom technique. So according to Agrawal, to question well is to teach well. To question well is to teach well. So if you are a teacher, you should master the art of asking questions in the class. If you are not asking questions, you are not a teacher, in other words. So any teacher who is actually into teaching and learning, everyday basis, regular basis, that you need to ask questions from your students to facilitate the learning and teaching process. So if I ask you this question, do you ask questions from your students? I know definitely you say yes, yes, yes. We ask questions from the students. But Agrawal's concern is most of the questions that you ask in the class, they are not effective. They're not effective. Why? For due to several reasons. So we are going to look at them now. How to make this questioning that you ask from your students effective classroom technique. Right. So to discuss questioning as a classroom technique, I have subtopics: categories of questioning, strategies of questioning, types of questions, levels of questioning, and designs of questioning. I repeat, to cover this topic, questioning as a classroom technique, we have 5 subtopics: categories of questioning, strategies of questioning, types of questions, levels of questioning, and designs of questioning. We'll take one by one. Categories of questioning. Agrawal once again used this term categories of questioning to refer to when do the teachers ask questions? When do the teachers ask questions during the lesson? He did research, he studied, he observed, and he came up with these findings that teachers ask questions. When and for what purpose in the class? So he gives the term categories of questioning. So if you take categories of questioning, that is when and how the teacher asks questions, when and why the teacher asks questions in the class, he identifies 4 categories. They are questions to begin the lesson, questions to develop the lesson, questions for recalling, questions for assessing, questions to begin the lesson, questions to develop the lesson, questions for recalling, and questions for assessing. Now, the first one is questions to begin the lesson. That is categories of questioning. That is at the outset of the lesson. Why do we ask as teachers questions to begin the lesson? What purposes? Can you tell me? Now, we start a lesson by asking questions from them. What purposes do these questions serve? නිකන් කියන්න බලන්න ඕගොල්ලන්ට මේක අලුත් දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. ඇයි අපි ලෙසන් එකක් පටන් ගන්නකොට ළමයිගේ ප්‍රශ්න අහන්නේ? අග්‍රමාල් කියන මේ මහානවා. We ask questions to begin the lesson. What purposes do these questions serve? Can you talk?
To orient the student to the lesson.
Can you please repeat and be loud?
To orient
Yeah.
the students for the lesson.
Yeah, that is it. Get the students' attention and get them ready for the lesson. You can ask them questions. Very good. To create an interest in them for the lesson. To get their attention to the lesson. Right. What else? To recall their prior knowledge. That is what they already know about the lesson, about the topic that you are going to do. Because they are not empty vessels. What they already know, you can actually discover, you can do it if you actually ask questions at the outset. So to create interest, to make them motivated, to get them active participants at the outset itself, and then to recall their prior knowledge, you can ask questions from the students. Now, 5E model ke engagement activity kekane at the outset itself that you give them an activity to recall their prior knowledge. So you can ask questions to recall their prior knowledge, but they already know about the topic. Okay, right. Then the second category is questions to develop the lesson. You ask probing questions. Questions to develop the lesson. You ask probing questions. What is meant by probing questions? That is, you guide them step by step by actually breaking down the hard facts into small, simple chunks, and you guide them towards the correct answer and develop the lesson. I give an example. If you ask your students how to make a coconut sambal, how to make a coconut sambal, sometimes the young learners, immature learners, not every one of them can actually go on telling how to make a coconut sambal. It's difficult for them. Rather, you will ask probing questions to develop the lesson. You will ask them, what are the ingredients that you need to actually make a coconut sambal? Now they give the ingredients. Okay. And then what is the first thing that you should do to actually make a coconut sambal? Now, after doing that, what you are supposed to do next? When do you add lime? And all these guiding questions, probing questions are asked by the teachers in order to actually develop the lesson. So then බලන ඒව කරනකොට the learner becomes a critical thinker. Rather than teacher goes on telling first you do this, first next you do this, the teacher guides them by asking questions step by step, probing questions, and you develop the lesson by actually getting the students to answer the questions. Step by step, you're getting them to actually learn the lesson. Is it clear to you?
Yes, madam.
Yeah. Then questions for recalling. Questions for recalling means now what they already know and what they already learn. So when you teach them, you can't teach them at a stretch everything and then finish it off. Instead, part by part only that you are building your lesson. So it's a grade 5 class. You're going to teach them deforestation. So you have a plan. That is, you're going to get them to define deforestation and causes for deforestation and consequences of deforestation. So there are 3 subtopics that you're going to actually teach them. Then first you will actually get them to define deforestation. Then only that you will move on to reasons for deforestation. So when you are in the second part, reasons for deforestation, that you can go back to what you have already discussed, definition of reforestation, and then ask questions to recall it. Ask questions to recall what is done as the part one of the lesson, something like that. Then the most important, questions for assessing. Questions for assessing. That is not at the end of the lesson. Don't get misled, right? All throughout your lesson, you will ask questions from your students to see whether they are learning, whether they are on the right track, right? Maybe after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you will ask a few questions on what you have done, and then you actually get them to do an activity and then ask questions, and at the end of the lesson also, that you will ask them questions to see whether they have learned what they're supposed to learn. So if questions are asked by the teachers for all these purposes during different stages of the lesson, Agrawal says you need to master the art of asking questions to make it effective. And with his observations, what he says is teachers ask questions, lots of questions, but all the questions are useless questions, right? So let's see how to, without making them useless questions, how to actually ask questions effectively. To discuss that, we are looking at the next topic, strategies of questioning. Strategies of questioning. That is to make questioning very effective in the class. The teacher has to be strategically, teacher has to use questioning techniques strategically, right? නිකාං අහන්නේ නැතුව strategically පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕනේ questioning කියන technique. Here I have about 5 strategies in questioning technique to make it effective. But there can be others as well. But we are discussing 5 of them. Are you okay?
Okay, madam.
Are you okay? Yes or no? Hello?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Now let's see what are these strategies of questioning. I have put it here: wait time, equitable distribution, frequency, repetition, and probing. So these are 5 strategies of questioning. There can be other strategies also, but we are looking at 5 of them. Strategies of questioning: wait time, equitable distribution, frequency, repetition, and probing. So let's say wait time. So wait time is asking questions using the technique of questioning strategically by the teacher to make it effective. Wait time is, now when you ask a question from the student, you definitely have to give them some time to form the answer, right? That is giving wait time. But according to Agrawal, what happens in the classroom is teachers ask lots of questions, but they don't give them any wait time, no wait time. So because of that, the students can't respond to the questions, as no wait time is given for them to actually formulate the answer. So if you want to use questioning as a teaching technique strategically in the class, make sure when you ask your students a question, you need to give them wait time. That is, they need time to actually form the answer first. Are we giving them a wait time, or we are always in a hurry to cover the syllabus? Ask a question, don't wait, go to the next person, ask the question, don't wait, like that. They're like machines. Agrawal says, in his observations, what he saw is teachers use questioning strategy, but not strategically. Giving them a wait time in order to formulate the answer is a must to make your questioning strategic. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, okay. Then the second observation by Agrawal, right? And he suggests that if you want to use questioning techniques strategically, make sure there is an equitable distribution of the questions. Equitable distribution is another strategy. Because he has seen that in his observation, in his research, that teachers ask questions from the front row, only from the good ones who actually jump in to give the answers, and a majority of the class is neglected. That is what he observed. And then he says, no, if you really want to use questioning strategy an effective way, make sure that there is equitable distribution of questions. If you have 40 students, how to make it actually all the 40 students actually are given equitable distribution, opportunity to answer. That is a big question mark, but you can be actually very strategic. They are putting them into groups and give a question to the group and all that, then it's manageable. But according to literature, to promote equitable distribution, some of the things that the teachers do, that is, teachers have lollipop sticks. They are on the table. And in the lollipop sticks, teacher has names of the students. So teacher randomly picks a lollipop stick and then read the name to answer the question. So like that way that you can actually to a certain extent promote equitable distribution. තේරෙනවද ඔයගලන්ට? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I'm taking 2-minute break. It's 8:33, 3:35 වෙනකන් I'm taking a break, okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Right, now I'm back. So equitable distribution can be promoted like this way also. Now, I have seen this. Now the teachers actually mentally divide the class into segments. Now suppose it's a class that you see, this is the front, this is the middle, and this is the back. And this is the left, this is the right. So you have segmented the classroom mentally into 6 parts. And then the teachers ask a question from this first front left. And then teacher asks the next question from the front right. Teacher asks another question from the middle left, like that, without actually looking only at the front row as there's a tendency. You can actually mentally divide the class and ask questions to actually promote equitable distribution of questions. Always it's not the same front people. That is it. It's equitable distribution. And another way, you can actually put them into groups. And then the group is given a question. So anybody from the group, their responsibility to take the turn. So that is there are some strategies that you can use in the equitable distribution of questioning to make questioning teaching technique a very strategic. Okay. Then will we go to the frequency. There will be actually, you can study it for exam purpose also, because we discuss it at length. So you can write an essay on questioning as a teaching technique. So frequency, if you take frequency, number of how often that you're asking questions. How often you're asking questions. According to Agrawal, some teachers ask questions once in blue moon. Once in blue moon means rarely. Teacher goes on telling, and then teacher gives them an activity and keep quiet. No questioning on regular basis. But how frequently that you are asking questions from your students. If the frequency is high, you as a teacher making use of questioning strategy effectively, not once in blue moon. That is another strategy that you can use in questioning. Then the fourth one is repetition. Repetition means you ask questions, the same question is repeated. So you might think it's absurd. No, why should we repeat the same question? You use repetition as a strategy of questioning to highlight and get the learner to pay attention to the main parts of the lesson. They should not miss the main parts. If they miss the main parts, they have not learned anything. So you don't want them to lose the main parts. Because of that, you ask the same question repeatedly if it is a question on the main part of the lesson. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the last strategy is probing. I already explained what probing questions are. That is simple to complex, step-by-step guidance to questioning by the teacher. The easiest example, can you tell me how to make a coconut sambal? Not that everyone can talk. But if you ask, what are the ingredients that we need to make a coconut sambal, right? What is the first step of actually making a coconut sambal? So after putting that, what can we do? And finally, when do we add lime? කියලා අහනකොට ළමයාට උත්තර දී ගන්න පුළුවන්. That is through asking probing questions. You can get them to actually learn. Right. So this is about strategies of question. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions, dear?
No, ma'am.
No, very good. Okay. Right. Then will we go to the next subtopic under questioning. Socrates, I'm going to discuss types of questions. Types of questions that you ask. Agrawal says, through his observations, he says teachers ask questions, but they are only yes no questions. They are closed ended questions. The students have to say yes or no.
Excuse me, ma'am, you are not
Yeah.
audible.
I'm not audible. Okay, let me see. Am I still? No. Now, is it fixed?
No, madam.
Silly problem. One minute. Let's see. Right. Now, is it okay?
No, madam.
The volume is low, madam.
Volume is not good enough. නේ? හයියෙන් දැම්මොත් මට හිතෙනවා කන පිපුරිලා යන තරම් මම කියවනවා කියලා. නැද්ද? එහෙනම් හරිය වැඩි කරන්නද? Okay. Is it okay now?
Now
Okay.
okay.
Oh, yes. Then okay. කන පිපිරෙනවා නම් කියන්න because I'm loud. Right. So Agrawal's observation is the teachers use questions in the class. But most of the questions are close-ended questions where the students have to say whether yes or no. Think of yourself. You might be asking lots of questions in the class for different purposes. But if you get the students to say yes or no, what's the point of asking these questions? They are not very effective way of asking questions. So make sure that you ask open-ended questions from your students. How can you make your questions open-ended? Use a WH question. Then they can't say yes. If you say, did you have your breakfast? They can say yes or no. If you ask, what did you have for your breakfast? They have to tell, I had string hoppers with dal curry and pulse on board. So always make sure that you as a teacher is asking open-ended questions from the students. It's another important thing that you should keep in mind. Okay,
Okay, madam.
Madam.
yeah. And according to Agrawal, most of the time teachers ask only yes no questions, close-ended questions, right? That is it. Now we are looking at types of questions. The first classification is close-ended questions and open-ended questions. We can go to another classification of types of questions that we ask. By looking at the Blosser's 1995 categorization of questions that the teacher asked, he identifies 5 types. That is rhetoric questions, managerial questions, probing questions, contextual questions, and influencing questions. I repeat, according to Blosser, teachers ask 5 types of questions in the class. Rhetoric, managerial, probing, contextual, and inferencing. Okay. Can you give me 2 minutes, Putta, once again? Okay. Right, I'm back. Then we were discussing rhetoric, the types of questions. Are you there?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, right. Now, this is Bloss's classification about types of questions that we ask. So, the 5 types: rhetoric, managerial, probing, contextual, and inferencing. So, Blosser says that if the teacher is asking questions, ask rhetoric questions. Teachers ask rhetoric questions. What is meant by rhetoric questions? What is meant by rhetoric questions? You ask questions, but you don't expect the students to answer the questions. Why do you ask rhetoric questions? You ask that questions to get the students to pay attention to the topic that you are going to talk. Right. Now, suppose you are going to talk about Sigiriya. So, you can ask a question about Sigiriya, but you don't expect your students to actually respond to it. That is to actually get them to pay attention to the topic or the important aspect that you're going to talk about. You can ask a rhetoric question. You don't wait for the students to answer. Instead, students pay attention to that question, means you get them back in the lesson and get them to concentrate. Okay? So rhetoric questions are very smart. Managerial questions. Teachers ask questions from the students to manage the classroom teaching and learning. Teachers ask questions from the students to manage the classroom teaching and learning. They're managerial questions, classroom management. Probing questions. Probing questions is that I explain it to you, guiding them towards the correct answer through a series of questions that the teacher asks. So you should master that art.
Excuse me,
Then you don't have to actually,
Excuse me, madam.
yeah,
Your
ma'am.
sound is
yeah.
not clear.
Your voice is not clear, ma'am.
Problems, but I don't know why. Let's see. Get near the window, right? Okay. Is it okay now?
Now it's okay.
Right. Okay. So probing questions we discussed, no? If as a teacher, if you master the art of asking probing questions to guide them step by step towards the correct answer rather than you yourself giving it, you are excellent. Try to develop those skills in you as a teacher, right? You need a little bit of planning initial stages. Now, suppose you are a novice teacher, you are not into the practice of asking probing questions a lot, instead that you yourself tell it now. You can actually, when you plan lessons, that you can actually write down what are the probing questions, series of questions that I'm going to ask my students. When you do it for actually 100 lessons, you don't have to actually then think about what is going to happen in the class in asking probing questions. You will master the art of doing that. So if you are actually interested in becoming more and more professional and a sought after teacher, right? This is very, very important. Okay. Then contextual questions and inferencing questions. Up, contextual questions like a cut and paste questions. Cut a book page. And you ask, it's about King Kashyapa, right? So, where was he born? Who were the parents? Who were his parents? Who made Sigiriya? Who is his brother? Kila Ahanamana, they are cut and paste directly from what they hear, what they see, what they watch. Cut and paste questions. Actually, as teachers, we do so because we have to know that they know what is given in the reading or listening passage. That is contextual questions. But inferencing questions also should be asked. It's actually a little bit advanced type of questions, but you have to make sure that you ask inferencing questions as well. According to Blosser, inferencing questions are, they are not directly taken from the text like cut and paste. You can't read something, find the answer. Instead, with what is given in the reading or the listening material, you have to actually infer the answer to the inferencing questions. For example, it's a poem about a scarecrow. The Scarecrow is the name of the poem. And it says, the scarecrow is old. He wears ragged clothes. He walks with a stick in his hand. His one peg foot is in the grave. What does he wear? Under contextual, ragged clothes. How does he walk? He walks with a stick, contextual. But if you ask, is this old man rich or poor? Is this man old or young? It is not directly stated. Instead, you have to infer. He is wearing ragged clothes. He's poor. He's walking with a stick. He's old. You have to infer the meaning. So the teacher should always ask inferencing questions. Then they can put two and two together and then infer the meaning of what they learn. And it's very, very important. So get into the habit of asking inferencing questions as well. Now, any questions with regard to Blosser's classification of types of questions? Anything?
Ma'am, I just want to know now the contextual questions are like cut and paste question and earlier you said there are two types of question, closed and ended and open-ended ended. No? So these two are similar, open-ended questions and the cut and
No, can't be, no, Putta. No, they are not similar because you can ask open-ended question for contextual as well, for inferencing as well. For example, in that poem, the scarecrow wearing ragged clothes. If you ask, what is he wearing? It's an open-ended question. It's a contextual question because the answer is cut and paste. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. If I ask, is he old? It's a close-ended question. Yes or no answer. But it is not directly said, it is inferencing. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Asking questions is really good at Taramam. I like it. Right.
Ma'am,
Then this is Blosser's classification. Yeah.
ma'am, can you explain about the managerial questions, ma'am?
Yeah, managerial questions. Of course, teachers ask managerial questions to manage the classroom activities. Have you done your homework? Where did you keep your books today? Can you get into groups and tell me? Right. Where are you going to be? With whom that you're going to pair up today? They are all not to teach the subject matter, but manage the classroom activities. Am I right?
Okay.
That is it. Got now?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Then we are actually looking at another classification of types of questions. Types of questions. We first look at open-ended and closed-ended. Then we looked at Blosser's classification of the types of questions that the teacher asks. And then we look at Costa is actually the educationist. We call it Costa's house of questioning or level of questioning. Costa's house of questioning or levels of questioning. They are, according to Costa's house of questioning, the teachers ask three types of questions in the class. First one, lowest level, gathering questions. Second one, the middle level, processing questions. Third one, the highest level, applying questions. Teachers ask gathering questions, processing questions, and applying questions. So if you take lowest level gathering, according to Costa's house of questioning, they are cut and paste ones. They are cut and paste ones. Directly from the text, gathering information. What is directly said. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? Yeah. And then processing questions. Processing questions, you can't actually directly take it from the text. Directly taking from the cut and paste, directly from the text, common listening when or reading when it's okay. But you can't directly take it. Instead, you need to infer. You need to infer. That is the middle level. Processing questions. Right? They are not directly from the text, cut and paste. And then highest level, applying level. There you ask questions for them to actually connect what they learn to the real world. They have to connect what they learn to the real world. For that purpose also that you can actually ask applying questions. Okay. I will actually give you give me a second. Okay, give me a second here. Oh, fine. No, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. Because of that, I'm not going to talk to you about it. Right. So that is Costa's. That is Costa's house of questioning or levels of questioning. So always ask cut and paste questions at the gathering level. Then you can ask processing questions where they have to actually infer the meaning, answers. And then at applying level, you get them to actually apply or what they learn into real life. Into real life. Okay. I had a nice video, but it cannot be played. Now, this is, I'm not going to discuss at length, but designs of questioning. This research is also done by Agrawal himself. Now, questioning is a hackneyed technique. Why do we call it hackneyed? Because everyday basis, teachers walk into the classroom and ask questions. But the problem is they are not effectively done. They are not strategically used. But anyway, they ask questions. Then if you use questioning technique on daily basis in the classroom, greater the chance that your students get bored of questioning. They get bored of questioning. They will take it for granted. They will not take it up very seriously. And then if the students are actually bored with your questioning, because it's done almost every day, then of course it's not going to be effective in the class. So for that, Agrawal suggests, as you are using questioning everyday basis to actually minimize boredom of your students about questioning technique that you use, you can use different designs of questioning. And he suggests some of the designs that he suggests. Hot seating. That is, you get the students to actually come to the hot seat to answer the question. To come to the hot seat, that they have to do something, perform, and then they actually come to the hot seat and answer your questions. Call a friend. Now you ask your students a question, and that student can't actually answer. Just because that the student can't answer, you don't have to actually move on to the next student. Then it is not effective because the student is demotivated. Instead, you can give them a chance, right? Okay, this is your group. I'm asking this question from you, and you don't know the answer. You have a chance. You can call a friend and ask the answer. That he or she, that student, can actually talk to some other student and get the answer, right? And then present it to the teacher. Pair rehearsal. So it's another design that you can use. You get them to be in pairs. They ask and they answer from questions as students from each other. Teacher has no intervention. Sometimes teacher gets them to actually ask and answer questions from each other. Pair rehearsal. Eavesdropping, that the teacher overhears what the students are discussing, and based on what they are discussing, the teacher asks questions. Staging or sequencing. Staging or sequencing, simple to complex. Simple questions and then complex questions like that. Mantle of the expert is also like that you get them to wear a cloak or something and then answer the question as in the magical world like that. So use different designs of questioning, because otherwise, as it is actually used everyday basis in the classroom, your students might definitely get bored of the teacher's use of questioning as a classroom technique. That is it. So with that, we come to the end of questioning as a classroom technique. So we discussed categories of questioning, strategies of questioning, types of questions, levels of questioning, and designs of questioning. Okay, Nanda.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Then we'll talk about brainstorming as a classroom technique. Brainstorming as a classroom technique. Right. Brainstorming as a classroom technique. Look at this. Brainstorming. What is brainstorming and how it is done? Brainstorming is a large or small group activity that encourages students to focus on a topic and contribute to the free flow of ideas. That is very important. Brainstorm බුද්ධි කලම්බය. බුද්ධිය කලම්බනවා. එතකොට free flow of ideas. That is getting the students to actually engage in brainstorming for the purpose of actually getting ideas. It's a free flow, right? The teacher may begin a brainstorming session by posing questions or problems, or by introducing a topic. Students then express possible answers, relevant words, and ideas. Contributions are accepted without criticism or judgment, usually summarized on a whiteboard by the teacher or a scribe. And these ideas are then examined, usually in an open class discussion format. So the steps of conducting a brainstorming session. Teacher should introduce the question, and students actually are put into groups, and they actually look for the possible answers. And there can be a scribe to take down what they say. Right. Then why use brainstorming? By expressing ideas and listening to what others say, students adjust their previous knowledge or understanding, accommodate new information, and increase their level of awareness. Brainstorming in main purposes are focuses students' attention on a particular topic, generate a quantity of ideas, because හරිද වැරදිද බලන්නේ උඩට ඔක්කොම කියනවා, right? So there's a quantity of ideas. So when you get them to brainstorm in groups, they learn how to actually accept and respect others' views and behaviors and attitudes. That is another advantage, okay? Then common issues in brainstorming. Common issues in brainstorming. Initially, some students may be reluctant to speak. Culture shock will be there. They are not ready to actually engage in these activities that you do because that they are not used to it. Those limitations are there. But you have to encourage your students. You have to encourage your students to listen carefully, politely to what their classmates contribute. Tell the speakers or the teacher when they cannot hear others clearly, and think of different suggestions or responses to share. Effective brainstorming, how to conduct an effective brainstorming session. Can one of you read it?
Effective brainstorming, how to
Yeah.
conduct an effective brainstorming session.
Mhm.
In a small or large group, select a leader and scribe, or this may be the teacher.
Yeah.
Define the problem or idea to be brainstormed. Make sure everyone is clear on the topic being explored. Set up the rules for the session. They should include letting the leader have control, allowing everyone to contribute, suspending evaluation of ideas until all ideas are gathered, the validity of all contributions, recording each answer and unless it is repeat, setting a time limit and stopping when the time is up.
Very good. Then number 4.
Start the brainstorming. Have the leader select members of the group to share their answers. The scribe should write down all responses, if possible, so that everyone can see them. Make sure not to evaluate or criticize any answers until the brainstorming is complete.
Very good. Thank you, Philip. Right. This is about brainstorming. When you want to actually conduct brainstorming sessions in the class, you have to, as the teacher, decide whether they are going to do it in small groups or large groups. Whether it's a small group or large group, it doesn't matter. You have to select a leader and a scribe. Leader to actually take the leadership of actually conducting the brainstorming session, and scribe to actually make notes of what they're telling. Make notes of what they're telling. Then the teacher, once they are put into groups and appointed the leader and a scribe, the teacher can actually give the topic to be brainstormed, ideas to be brainstormed based on a topic. Then before giving them before getting them to start the brainstorming, you definitely have to actually tell them how much time is there for them to brainstorm. Otherwise, if you don't mention the time, they will not actually brainstorm. They will start thinking only. I can go on thinking, no. So they will take their own time to think. But brainstorming is different. You give them a limited time. You have only 5 minutes. The brainstorming session is only 5 minutes. So they have to generate ideas within 5 minutes. We have only 5 minutes is the kind of trick that for them to actually generate ideas, for the free flow of ideas. If you don't specify the time, they will just start thinking, not brainstorming. Do you get my point? තේරුණාද නැද්ද?
Yes, ma'am, understood.
Yeah. නිකන් හිතන්න ගන්නවා. නමුත් time තියෙන මෙච්චරයි කිව්වම අන්න brainstorm පටන් ගන්නවා, right? Right. And when they are doing the brainstorming session, feedback is withheld. You're not going to tell them you're wrong, this is right කියලා කියන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. You don't do that. එතකොට අර brainstorming එක නවතිනවා. Free flow of ideas stops. So you're not going to actually give feedback, it is withheld until the brainstorming session is over. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. They can go on generating ideas. So you have to withhold feedback. Somehow irrelevant, wrong, but you don't give feedback during the brainstorming session. If you actually intervene, if you stop them, no brainstorming can happen. Make sure that you don't give them feedback, whether right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Right. And then once the brainstorming is over, the time is up, now they have to stop. Then it should be followed by a discussion that is to sort it out. What is right, what is wrong, what is relevant, what is irrelevant, what should be the priority, what should be the most important. So the teacher should lead a discussion with the students with the ideas brainstormed. Always a brainstorming session is followed by a discussion. This is where that you give them feedback, relevant or irrelevant, right or wrong, most important and least important, like that. Okay, that is another thing. Then you can actually, it's important for the teacher to establish a warm, supportive environment. Otherwise, students are inhibited. Only the good ones will talk, the others will keep quiet. So you cannot actually do a very effective brainstorming session if there is no warm and supportive environment. So if you want to use brainstorming as a strategy in the class regular basis, the classroom should be a very free classroom. Okay. Emphasize that a quantity rather than the quality of ideas is the goal. In a brainstorming session, we look at the quantity of ideas, how much of ideas are generated. The quality of ideas is the latter part, that is the discussion part. Okay, so you have to make sure that your students know that it's okay to actually make mistakes. It's okay if the facts are irrelevant, but free flow of quantity of ideas, a large number of ideas is what is needed in a brainstorming, and your students know, aware of it. And you never actually get the peers to critically comment on what they have said during the brainstorming or idea gathering phase. And you have to make sure that your students have soft skills developed. They can respect others' ideas. They are ready to accept others' ideas. They can wait till their turn comes. They don't dominate, but they know that everyone should talk. All these soft skills are developed in your students. Make sure that it happens. Right. So that is about brainstorming in the class. So I think because I have actually observed lessons of my postgrad students, and they say they use brainstorming, but they don't specify the time at the outset. They don't actually, they start giving feedback during the brainstorming. They don't actually appoint leaders and scribes. So then it's not proper, right? They don't tell the students it's all right. We look at the quantity, not the quality. So whatever comes to your mind is okay. Don't worry about mistakes. එහෙම කරන්න නැත්නම් ඒක brainstorming session එකක් නෙමෙයි. That is it. So with that, I think I can conclude the work I have done, but I have another 10-15 minutes. The rest of it, what I did with you. The rest of it, what I did with you is, I discuss models of teaching. What are the two models of teaching I discussed? What are the PPP model of teaching and 5E model of teaching? And I told you PPP model of teaching is grounded on behaviorism, highly teacher-centered. 5E model of teaching is grounded in constructivism, highly student-centered. And then we looked at lesson planning, the components of a lesson: time, class size, the topic, then you have to tell the lesson objectives into the 3 domains of Bloom's, that is affective, cognitive, and psychomotor. And then you have to write SMART objectives. And then we looked at stages of a lesson, how it is developed, and then assessment, how you are going to assess them. To assess them, that you write the cognitive domain lesson objectives. And we looked at Bloom's taxonomy, the cognitive domain, the levels, then affective domains, the levels, and the psychomotor domain, the levels. But basically, when it comes to levels, we look at cognitive domain only, right? That is it. And then today we discuss techniques in teaching. That we discuss questioning and brainstorming as 2 techniques. So this is what I covered in this module. And I can actually give you 1 or 2 sample questions. It doesn't mean that exact question is there in the paper. They're sample questions. Then you can see what kind of questions that you get in the paper. Do you want it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Give me a second. They are samples only. Yeah? Don't get misled. These questions will be there in the paper. Kiala. Normally, you have structured essay questions in the paper. You have structured essay questions in the paper. Right. And if you study what I am sending you as lecture materials, you will definitely be able to actually get a good grade. Don't worry, okay? What happened? Right. One of the questions may be, right, a possible question. Compare and contrast compare and contrast two main approaches to teaching, namely teacher-centered and student-centered, referring to 10 important elements. Essay question. Compare and contrast the two main approaches to teaching, namely teacher-centered and student-centered, referring to 10 important aspects. Will you be able to answer that question?
Ma'am, say again the question, ma'am.
Compare and contrast the two main approaches to teaching, namely teacher-centered approach and student-centered approach, referring to 10 important aspects. පුළුවන්ද බැරිද?
Can, madam.
පුළුවන්. දැන් මම අහන්න පුළුවන් තව එකක්. Questioning is an important classroom teaching technique. Comment, referring to categories of questioning, strategies of questioning, types of questions, etc. Sometimes I may not tell that. I will just quote. Questioning is a very important classroom teaching technique. Do you agree? Discuss. Then you have to know what you're supposed to talk about. You can talk about categories of questioning, strategies of questioning, types of questions, etc. And ultimately that you can say as it is a hackneyed technique to avoid boredom of the students, that you can actually go for different designs of questioning as well. Right. So third one, තව sample question එකක් දුන්නා. Right? Select any of the methods that aligns with student-centered approach to teaching and discuss its characteristics and pros and cons. Select any of the teaching methods that aligns with student-centered approach and this state 5 main characteristics with their pros and cons. Can you? එතනදී ඔයාලට තෝරගන්න පුළුවන් discussion or scientific method or jigsaw method or whatever. Another question that I may ask. PPP model of teaching is grounded on behaviorism. Part 1. What are the stages of the PPP model? Part 2. Right? Part 2. Part 2. What are the limitations of the PPP model? What are the limitations of the PPP model? Then another question may be, the 5E model is grounded on constructivism and what are the 5 stages of 5E model and what purposes do they serve in the lesson? What purposes does each of the stage serves in the lesson? So if you take the engagement lesson, engagement stage, recalling prior knowledge, motivating the learner, liberating the learner at the outset and making active participants, etc. Second one is exploration, where the students in groups explore the new knowledge, discover new knowledge by engaging in cooperative learning. And then the third one is explanation. In this stage, students actually present their answers to the questions and then the tasks and then discuss the subject matter, lead a discussion about the subject matter. And then elaboration stage, the students apply the newly discovered knowledge into other contexts and transfer their knowledge into the long-term memory. And evaluation happens all throughout, where the teacher assess the students have learned the subject matter or not. That is it. So these are some of the sample questions that I gave you. Okay, the
Okay.
madam, right. And then, so with that, I can wind up. And I want to thank you for being in my class, learning from me. So I want you to actually study, work hard, and then it's not only exam purpose, but when you walk into the classroom also, what we learn in educational technology and psychology, you can try to incorporate them into your classroom teaching and learning process and see how your students are benefited. Okay?
Excuse me, madam.
Yeah.
We didn't get the materials for last 2 classes.
Yeah, as I
The
told
class held
you,
on 8th.
yeah, now as I told you, I know some of the materials sent and the last 2 classes it's not sent, and today it's 3. But I'm not going to actually
Yes.
separate it again. I'm going to actually send you in 2 zip files, psychology and educational technology. In 1 zip file, all the lecture materials in order, right? And if for psychology also, all the lecture materials in order of teaching. So all the lecture materials in 1 zip file, but I need time till Wednesday. Okay,
Okay, madam.
Okay,
now,
madam.
if you don't get that, you can actually drop me, send me a message through the campus. I will make sure that it happens by Wednesday, not before that. Okay? Okay, dear. So can I end the meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Did you learn something from this module? To bring to the class and do better teaching? Did you learn something?
Yes, madam.
Right. Okay. Right. Then thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye. Good night, every one of you.